There's been an increase in news stories about a surge in patients being treated at hospitals for adverse reactions to tick bites. Here's a story from an ABC affiliate channel in Tennessee.
CDC says tick season came early in Tennessee, and now state emergency departments are reporting a surge in patients with bites and more serious reactions to them. They're one of summer's tiniest threats, and this year they're sending more Tennesseans to the ER.
I've been here for about 10 years in the Nashville area, and this is the most I've seen tick patients in just a couple months that we've started seeing them.
Not only have nurses at the TriStar Bellevue ER seen more tick bites this year, but also more severe reactions.
We've had a couple anaphylactic reactions from tick bites, abscesses, infected wounds, things along those lines.
They're all health risks ticks can pose. Some can last a lifetime, like alpha-gal syndrome. Transmitted by a tick bite, it causes a serious and potentially life-threatening allergy to a sugar molecule found in red meat. According to lawmakers, more than 33% of Tennesseans in rural areas have alpha-gal syndrome, including Jody Zorsch.
Reading labels has never been as important to me as it has been in the last year since I've been diagnosed. Not only is alpha-gal in meat, it's in pork, which they say that's the other white meat, but it's still considered a red meat. It's in our medicine. It's in our shampoos. It's in our paper materials. It's in lotions. It's in perfumes. It's in everything.
Last year, lawmakers passed a bill requiring healthcare providers to report every case of alpha-gal to the state.
So there we have hospital staff talking about the increase in patients, and then you have a woman talking about how she was diagnosed with alpha-gal syndrome after having an adverse reaction to a tick bite, and now she's allergic to meat. And I think all of us can agree, for the most part, that would be awful to not be able to eat meat any longer. But if you listen to this bioethicist and philosopher Matthew Liao speaking at the World Science Festival in 2016, he doesn't necessarily think it would be a bad thing.
The last thing I'll say is just the human engineering. I think that with this with this ability to synthesize human genome, we can actually do a lot of things. There's actually a lot of opportunities for this to solve big world problems. So one thing is the climate change. And there, I'll just use, sort of climate change is a really big problem. We don't really know how to solve it. But it turns out that we can use human engineering to help us address climate change. So I'll give two examples. So one is that people eat too much meat, right? And if they were to cut down on their consumption on meat, then they would, it would actually really help the planet. But people are not willing to give up meat. Yeah, some people will be willing to, but other people, they may be willing to, but they have a weakness of will. They say, wow, this steak is just too juicy. I can't do it. I'm one of those, by the way. So, but so here's the thought, right? So it turns out that we know a lot about, we have these intolerance to, for example, I have milk intolerance. And some people are intolerant to crayfish. So possibly we can use human engineering to make it the case that we're intolerant to certain kinds of meat, to certain kinds of bovine proteins. And there's actually analogs of this in life. There's this thing called the Lone Star tick, where if it bites you, you'll become allergic to meat. I can sort of describe the mechanism. So that's something that we can do through human engineering. We can kind of possibly address really big world problems through human engineering.
So that's Matthew Liao. He's currently the director of the Center for Bioethics and professor of global public health and affiliated professor in the Department of Philosophy at New York University. And you see, he's one of these intellectual elites that likes to, think about, what do we have a moral responsibility to do? Like, what's right and what's wrong? And he's saying that, it'd be great to bioengineer people and make them allergic to meat. What does that even look like? So this guy's a bioethicist. That means he analyzes moral, social, and legal dilemmas that arise in medicine, biotechnology, and life sciences. He advises policymakers on issues like genetic engineering, and he's also the same guy that's at, universities indoctrinating the youth that are going to go on to be in positions of power and make decisions down the road. And when you've got generations of young people that have been propagandized and terrified of climate change and global warming, they might think that, maybe we should do something like spread ticks out to make people sick and allergic to meat, because that would reduce their meat consumption. We can cut down on the amount of cattle that we have, and that would be great. You know, the ends really justify the means. And so what if we make people a little sick and now they can't eat meat? Like, maybe that's better. Like, you know, this guy's saying this on a big stage. He's at the World Science Forum. Now, I've seen some people online saying that this guy's part of the WEF, the World Economic Forum, with Klaus Schwab, which, don't be wrong, the World Science Forum, it is a, you know, globalist conference, but it's not the WEF. So this guy, I haven't found anything that shows that he's tied in with the WEF at all. But if he's saying this, you know, what kind of crazy stuff does he say in the classroom when he doesn't have, you know, such a large audience and cameras on him all the time? And you see, he tries to, you know, be relatable. He's like, oh yeah, I'm one of those guys. I can't resist a juicy steak. He's like, but you know, people, they just can't stop eating meat, and that's a problem. And, you know, this gets into that Cass Sunstein type thinking. You know, Cass Sunstein, he's another one of those intellectual elite guys. He's the husband of Samantha Power. But he wrote that book, Nudge, and basically was saying, like, well, we'll try to encourage people to do what we think is the right thing. But if they can't do it, then we kind of got to give them a little push, give them a little nudge in the direction that they want to go. And so, well, you know, if people aren't, you know, reducing their meat intake, well, maybe we need to take this into our own hands and spread ticks out that would potentially make people sick and allergic to meat. And I know we don't really have any direct proof of this. Some people have pointed to Bill Gates and his partnerships with Oxytec to do GMO ticks, which Bill Gates has done, but, you know, the fact checkers will say, well, actually, the work that Bill Gates is doing with Oxytec and GMOing ticks is with a different type of tick, and it has nothing to do with the Lone Star tick. So these are just false conspiracy claims. And I don't know. It's just so hard to tell, and you can't trust these people. You know what I mean? These are the same type of people that were like, oh, trust us. You know, we got to flatten the curve. You know, just do what we say. Do the lockdowns. We're so smart and we're better than you. And you know, it all stems from the, you know, this progressive, you know, ideology. And that's before Liao was at New York University, he was a teacher of philosophy at Oxford and Princeton. And Oxford's where all of the Rhodes Scholars go. And if you know anything about the Rhodes Scholarships, that comes from Cecil Rhodes, who was an imperialist that basically colonized a large portion of Africa and started, the De Beers Mining Company. So he was stripping Africa of their diamonds and other resources. And it's actually Rhodesia was, you know, part of the region where he took over. But that's what the Rhodes Scholarship is, okay? This guy came up with this scholarship program, and his whole philosophy was, well, I'll have these, you know, we'll take the great leaders and intellectual elite of the world, and we'll bring them here to Oxford, and we'll indoctrinate them with exactly how we want them to think. And then after they leave, they'll go off and take global positions of power and be able to have influence and do the things that we want them to do, which is exactly what the World Science Forum and the World Economic Forum and globalist things like that are. So when you see all of these increases of tick bites and adverse reactions that are going on, you do have to question, you know, whether or not there's some type of intentional effort to make this happen. I don't know. Maybe I'm way off the mark. Maybe it's a conspiracy theory. I don't know. What do you think? Tell me in the comments. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment.